Have you ever heard of a car called a Lister? Chances are you haven't, unless you were a childhood car nut like I was, and you remember the big, powerful Lister Jaguar sports racing cars of the 50s. I won't even ask if you've seen one of these. This is the 200 miles an hour, 600 horsepower Lister Storm, and there are less than 20 of them on the road. And we're going to put this one through its paces.
The Lister is a handmade car with a very exotic composite body and chassis. The only bit they don't make themselves is the Jaguar V12 engine, and that's very highly modified. This car costs 3 times as much as a Ferrari 355.
So here we are on the driving seat of the Lister Storm. Two things immediately very striking about this car. One, the size of the engine, 7-litre modified Jaguar V12 with a supercharger on it. 600 horsepower, goes as fast as you could possibly want any car to go. Surprise number 2 is the fact that it's such a small car. 600 horsepower cars are usually hugely wide, hugely long. You can't see out of them. There are lots of problems with driving them quickly. But this feels like quite a normal coupe, a kind of Corrado-sized car. The only thing that makes it clear to you that it's a car with such a lot of potential, apart from the fact that it goes so well when you give it a bit of a boot, is the fact that the rubber is so big. You feel the tyres, the effects of the tyres through the steering, particularly at low speed, and it is quite a lumpy ride at low speed. Feel that. The rest of the controls are best described, I should think, as meaty. The clutch is really quite heavy, but it's very precise in movement and doesn't move all that far. You need to have a pretty substantial thigh muscle to use it a lot better. Brakes again, very quick to respond, loads of retardation, but fair bit of effort needed. They're race bred as well, 14-inch diameter, enormous. Naturally enough, the Storm has faults. No car was ever built without them. I think the steering is a bit too light. Given that the rest of the controls are quite firm to use, it's a little bit easy to swing it around. But they tell me that later models, this is a pre-production prototype, later models are built with more effort in the steering. Worst fault is the fact that it does look ugly. Some people say it's brutal, a lot of people say it gets your attention, and all that is true. But the plain fact of the matter is that what's under the skin is not well represented by the skin itself. That's my opinion.
And what is under the skin is akin to the very best modern racing cars. The engine's crankshaft is machined from one gigantic block of steel, right here in the Lister workshop. That special crankshaft is one of the reasons why the engine is so powerful. Its heads, camshafts, valves and pistons are all race-bred too. The body and chassis both use expensive space-age materials, carbon fiber, Kevlar and aluminium. They're stronger and much lighter than the usual combination of fiberglass and steel, which is why the Storm weighs no more than a family hatchback. It's not only light, it's aerodynamic. This is one of the very few road cars with downforce. This careful shaping of the car's underside means it's literally sucked down onto the road for stability and great road holding in high-speed corners. And as you'd expect, the interior is sumptuous, swathed in hand-stitched leather, which is a million miles from Lister's Le Mans car, which showed such a lot of promise in 1995. Lister is convinced that this kind of racing is the way to develop their image and heritage and make their production cars even more effective on the road.
So, what do you think when you think diesel? If you're like most people, you think noisy, you think smelly, you think slow. Traditionally, diesel has sacrificed everything from refinement to style at the altar of economy. You'd only ever buy one if maximum fuel consumption was your top priority. No longer. Here are two diesels that are as stylish as they are economical, and as refined as they are responsible. First up is the diesel version of Audi's new A4, the most stylish small saloon in the world. It uses a new diesel engine from its parent Volkswagen, with direct injection giving more power and economy in exchange for a little more noise. For all its high-tech engineering, it still sounds like a diesel at idle, thanks to the inherently coarse nature of its four-cylinder engine. Like other modern diesels, it's fitted with a catalytic converter, which not only reduces exhaust emissions, but also banishes that traditional diesel smell to the history books for good. Performance, while hardly electrifying, is certainly good enough to allow you to cruise at whatever speed you choose. And if you choose that speed to be 56 miles per hour, according to Audi, each gallon of diesel will take you over 72 miles. BMW's 325 TDS makes no such claim. It is, instead, the smoothest and quickest performing diesel engine car. It will out-accelerate such performance stars as the Volkswagen Golf GTI without raising a sweat, and flat out will do over 130 miles per hour. BMW's straight-six engine probably has a better claim to being the finest diesel engine in the world than any other. And while direct injection makes the Audi a little noisy, this indirect injection BMW is so smooth and so quiet on the motorway that I'd challenge anyone to tell it was a diesel. Choosing between them is difficult. While the BMW is undoubtedly the more impressive of the two, it is also much more expensive than the Audi. It is as far removed from the rattling, stinking diesels of old as the car is from the horse and trap. The Audi may not be as smooth, nor go so fast, but for the traditional diesel enthusiast, a car that looks this good, yet will still do over 70 miles to the gallon, must be a dream come true. So the next time you hear this, don't be so swift to condemn the diesel.
On a Surrey test track, instructor Bernard Aubrey teaches a Porsche customer how to handle his high-performance car.
Great stuff. Now, as you accelerate gently out of the curve, the car's assuming a slightly right-hand position towards the centre line.
But only a quarter of new supercar owners get training like this.
You hear people say, I can't play tennis, I'm not very good at skiing, but you never ever hear people say, do you know, I'm not a very good driver. And it's entirely inappropriate that a not very good driver will go out and buy an immensely fast car because they just don't know how to handle it.
I've just rented this Porsche Carrera for the day, and all it took was money. Even though I've never driven one before, I wasn't required to take any special kind of training before driving away in a car that can do 168 miles an hour. And let's face it, most people with a fast car want to see what it can do. Michel Jobbins was killed by a Porsche driver showing off to his passenger. His 6-year sentence was reduced on appeal. Now Michel's parents are organising a petition to have the full sentence restored.
He put the car in gear and just put his foot hard down on the accelerator and reached speeds of 90 miles an hour plus on a 30-mile-an-hour road, purely showing off, and killed my daughter.
A car driven at excessive speed, especially a powerful car, is a lethal killing machine. It's a lethal weapon.
I'm not responsible for the people who drive our cars. My responsibility is to ensure that our cars are safe in everyday usage, and to ensure, as far as practical, by recommending advanced driving tuition, that people actually enjoy our cars in a safe manner.
This year's Festival of Speed at Goodwood.
Now we come on to the supercars.
We celebrate speed, but on the road, speed kills 1,000 people a year. And those supercars have better brakes, their drivers still have relatively more accidents. For every 10,000 standard cars, 278 are involved in accidents causing injury. For every 10,000 high-performance ones, 309, significantly more. Another training session at Lotus.
If you improve your driving technically, then you don't need speed for it to be satisfying.
But for supercar owner Paul Lawrence, speed is certainly part of what his £50,000 is buying.
Quite an experience. I mean, it's nice to see that the car's performance is, as you read it in the magazines, it is very fast, very exhilarating and good fun.
Speed on the racetrack is fine, but on the road, it's a killer. People who discover what their cars can do here may think they can handle anything, anywhere. To ride a fast motorbike, you need a special license. Now, supercar drivers may be heading the same way.
Coming up after the break, Steve Cropley falls back in love with the Austin-Healey. And we meet a man who reckons this Nissan is a better bet than his classic Lancia or Jaguar XJ220.
There is no tougher test on your hands than working in the coldest and roughest of conditions. But through long experience, Arctic fishermen...
This is my favourite car, an Austin-Healey 104. This one was built by Donald Healey in 1954, and very rarely did a motor manufacturer do a better thing. There are loads of reasons why I like this car. The first one, you can hear the engine, 4-cylinder, 2.6-litre engine, straight out of an old Austin saloon, not very refined, but very, very meaty. Pulls like a locomotive, sounds lovely. I wouldn't have anything else. What's so great about this car is the amazing period features. Like the wipers, they might have come off a Model T Ford, I reckon, and the horn button on the dashboard, and this funny old switch to turn the wipers on and off, and the Lucas brand on the rear vision mirror. They're all so 50s or earlier. But to go along with that, of course, this car has got some surprisingly modern features. It's rigid. The body doesn't shake around much. It's reasonable, given that there's no side screens, it's reasonably turbulence-free in the cockpit. The bucket seats are real bucket seats, so they hold you in the corners. So you don't move the steering much to make the car deflect. It's got very brisk steering. And of course the instruments are completely uncomplicated and easy to read. So in some ways it's actually better than the cars we drive today.
The Austin-Healey 100 wasn't Donald Healey's first car by any means, but it was certainly his best and the one he's remembered for. He showed a prototype of this car in 1952 at the motor show, and along came the boss of BMC and bought it, just like that. Put it in production, and here it is on the road. They built 4-cylinder ones until 1956 and then changed to the thing that became the 3000, the one everyone remembers. But I like this one. To me, the styling of this car is a miracle. Back in 1952, they didn't build a lot of full-size models. They just drew it up and then they started work. And yet, look at the style of this car. Look at this magnificent little piece of styling line here. Look at the way it's squeezed down on the road. Look at the Coke bottle lines. Look at the curvature on this beautiful windscreen pillar. And look at that line there. That's the line I like best on the car of all. I think it's magnificent. It just suits the line so much. Wire wheels, lovely rounded rear. Even the seat shape is perfect. Those louvers in the bonnet are a very 50s feature. They're not actually standard on the 100M, but the owner has put them on here, along with a leather strap to keep the bonnet down. It looks like a styling feature, but it's actually very necessary. Otherwise, the breeze is likely to have it off and smack you around the eyebrows. Now, I know what you're thinking. Can I afford one of these things? Well, I think you can. It's a very cheap car. You can buy a basic Austin-Healey 104 for about the price of a mid-range Ford Escort, and that is outrageous value for money when you consider that they're not going to go down in price either.
You know what's best about this car? It's not the weather protection, that's for sure. It's the fact that it's been already in service for 40 years and probably a dozen owners have enjoyed it. And here we are enjoying it, and no doubt a dozen more will enjoy it. Isn't that great?
Every time you get into your car, the new device tests your sobriety. Put the key in the ignition, and it asks you for a breath sample. Blow into the sensor, and it measures the alcohol in your breath. If you're under the limit, it allows you to drive off. Fail, and the car won't start. Try to cheat with, say, air from a balloon, and the device knows it wasn't a real breath. Get a friend to blow in the sensor, and it will catch you out later by asking for another sample as you're driving along. If you fail the test, this happens. The game's up. Everyone knows you're over the limit. In the US, almost 500,000 devices have been fitted on the orders of the courts as an alternative to banning drink driving offenders. This computer on board records the results of every test. It can then be linked by telephone to a computer in a probation office. Coded information says whether the probationer has been trying to cheat. The real beauty of this device is that if I've had a drink or two, I may have the car keys, but there's no way I can drive home because the system won't let me start the engine. So I might as well start walking.
Anthony Hussey is a director of the world-famous Connolly leather company, whose hides grace some of the world's finest cars. He also has a passion for sports cars and a particularly interesting personal collection, which he was very keen to demonstrate to us.
Out of all the cars I get to drive, this is far and away the most fun. It's one of 59 right-hand drive Lancia Aurelia Spiders, made in 1955 out of a grand total of about 230. I bought it in 1966 for £375. It's had a tremendous amount of use because it's been used extensively in classic rallying. It's done 5 Pirelli marathons, a couple of Monte Carlo challenges, and 3 or 4 circuits of Ireland, among a lot of other smaller rallies. And it's got to be the best thing to drive over all those northern Italian passes because it's so well balanced. It's got its engine in the front, its gearboxes in the back axle. With that and the combination of this suspension, it's just so much more fun. Apart from which, when you get an old man like me, you can have all your fun at about 65, 70 miles an hour, whereas if you're in supercars, you're not even getting wildly illegal. It's probably quicker than I would care to cope with. So, this is the real fun car. Tremendous enjoyment, but trifling impractical, particularly if it's raining, because it leaks like a sieve. And in fact, for every day-to-day use, it's about as impractical as that magnificent beast over there, which you've probably been feasting your eyes on. Let's have a look at it. Well, this is drop-dead good-looking. Absolutely stunning. And that is what helps us sell our luggage and our leather. And the whole car has all the memories of Jaguar in it. I can see C-Type, D-Type, E-Type, and yet it takes all those traditional lines and brings them up to date and then projects them into the future. It's a modern, elegant design. It's not just beautiful, it's got a 3.5-litre V6 engine with twin turbos, which will hurl it at the horizon up to a speed of 213 miles an hour and propel it from 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. Apart from the exterior helping to sell our luggage, the leather in the interior is a very powerful sales feature. We've trimmed it out in very special aniline leather, which is completely natural. It hasn't got an awful lot of finish on it. it will wear and age beautifully. But I'm not going to take you out in the Jaguar today. I'd much rather take you out in one of these. You can buy 13 of them for the price of the Jaguar, and they're the last word in discretion. This is a Nissan Skyline GTR. It's got a 2.6 straight 6, 2.5 litre engine, twin turbos. It's been re-chipped to 370 brake horsepower. Why the Japanese never sold these in England, because they're all made right-hand drive, I don't really understand. In a straight line, it's comparable in performance to a Porsche Carrera. But because it has computerized transmission system which transfers power from the back wheels to the front when you're going quickly around corners, which one would only ever, of course, do on a track, then it rewrites the rule books when it comes to handling. When they brought it over here, they put it on a track and it blew all the Ford Sierra Cosworths away at the time. It was so much quicker that they banned it from racing. But as a road car, it's my idea of paradise because it's discreet. In fact, its styling is, well, I've heard it described as council estate styling, which is quite accurate. That, to me, has its own charm because it means that those people who don't know what it is don't bother to look at it. That means it doesn't attract the attention of small boys or policemen, and there's a jolly good chance that if you park it somewhere in London, it'll still be there when you get back. So to sum up the three cars, the Lancia is a delight, particularly in good weather, a beautifully balanced sports car. The Jaguar, drop-dead good looking, tons of power, very high profile. And this is just the perfect balance between power and discretion. Between the three cars, I'm dead lucky to have such a marvellous choice.